we've seen the Bank of England base rate drop from 4.25 to 4%. This is despite the fact that inflation is currently at 3.6% making this video, and it's forecast to hit 4% by the end of this year. And in Q4 this year, October, early November, we're going to be getting the autumn statement. Now, there's been a lot of conversation about whether or not the Bank of England are asleep at the wheel. I mean, if you look at the voting record at the Monetary Policy Committee last week, there was a 5-4 vote in favour of a bank rate reduction to the 4%, which they did. A 5-4 vote would tell you that there would have been, I would argue, a pretty big debate as to whether or not it is the right move. Some are speculating that they had to do that because of the state of the economy, inflation. Now, these things are all factors that are going to impact political decisions by the Chancellor, fiscal decisions I might add, around what she's going to do and how it's going to impact individual households in the UK when it comes to your spending power. You've gone to work, you paid all your bills, what do you have left over? And it leaves us with a very, very interesting question of where is she going to find the money she is going to need in order to avoid raising taxes. That's the topic of conversation we're trying to tackle today. If you've not already subscribed to the channel, this is the kind of stuff that I do. I know that there's a large number of you that watch but don't subscribe. Please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up. Let's just jump into a Sky report on this.
Back here again, talking about tax rises, and this time it's NISA, the country's oldest economic research institute, which is warning that the Chancellor needs to find some cash if she wants to meet her fiscal rules. So what exactly has gone wrong this time? Well, back in March, the Chancellor had £9.9 billion of headroom against her fiscal rules, those non-negotiables, the main one being to make sure all day-to-day spending is covered only with tax receipts, so no extra borrowing. Well, this is how quickly everything's unravelled. First up, the government's decision to reverse its cuts to the winter fuel payment. Well, that's £1.5 billion it no longer has to play with. Then it's welfare reforms, the ones it couldn't get past its own party. That's £13.7 billion gone. And then higher than expected spending, partly because of interest on government debt. That's £14.3 billion. And this is the big one. Growth, weaker than expected economic growth and employment. And that could wipe out £22.2 billion. And growth is important because more growth means more tax revenue. And Labour have promised it, but so far we haven't seen the results. NISA's forecasts, as you can see here, are consistently lower than the Office for Budget Responsibility, which has traditionally been more optimistic than other forecasters. And that gets us here, deep in the red. If the government wants to restore its buffer, its fiscal buffer of £9.9 billion, well, then we're talking about a gap of £50 billion.
And I think this is an important point to kind of like make sure that we're clear on for the purpose of this video. There is a huge gap. 42 billion pounds in terms of a black hole, purely because Labour haven't really been able to implement some of the stuff that they've wanted to. And I think when you look at the petition calling for a general election immediately, I think there is a sense of unhappiness in the populace right now around the way by which Labour are going about their business. But unfortunately, the truth is that because the economy has not grown and the cost of borrowing has gone up, we're going to have to find money to fill this gap. So what are the options? And this is what we're going to jump into next.
Which of course begs the question, where is Rachel Reeves going to find that money? Well, here are some options. The first one, income tax. Tax thresholds have been frozen for some time, that derided fiscal drag. She could extend that freeze for an extra year, bringing in £5.8 billion. She could reverse the NICS cuts, the national insurance cuts that the Tories implemented, the 2 percentage point cuts. That could bring in £10.3 billion. And then you'll have heard a lot of chatter about this on the cash ISA limit. Reducing that from 20,000 to 4,000 could bring in £1 billion. And she could also lower relief on pension contributions, bringing in £15 billion.
Now, worthwhile noting here that the things that they mentioned here in terms of freezing the tax threshold, that's only extending it for another year. And what that basically does through fiscal drag, it means that as people earn more money, the tax receipts go up because you're the tax thresholds have basically been frozen. You're not moving, you're moving into a new threshold, going into a higher tax bracket. That's going to impact quite a few people. But that's only going to bring in £5.8 billion. Now, reversing the national insurance cuts that what was his name? Jeremy Hunt brought in towards the end of the Tory tenure. Remember, there were two. Bringing those back in would generate 10.3 billion quid. Now, we've spoken about cutting cash ISAs here for some time on this channel. 1 billion. Now, interestingly, that has not gone away. And we made videos on this channel earlier this year, especially when we were looking at the recent announcement, I should say, from Rachel Reeves, where she was supposed to announce the reduction from £20,000 to £4,000 for cash ISAs. She was, at that point, approached by building societies to say, look, if you do that, we're going to have less money to be able to lend to first home buyers on mortgages. That's going to impact the property market. Therefore, there'll be a wider impact on the economy. But while she's trying to balance all of these things, the truth is, and the big question is, well, how does she balance all of these things but not take from a pot that she needs to take from? And I think when you look at the cash ISA pot specifically here, I mean, it's only £1 billion, but it's still £1 billion, and that's per year, by the way. And the next one, or the last one they mentioned there, is lower pensions relief. Now, this is something that, again, has been in the conversation for some time now, equalising pensions relief for everyone to about maybe 33% roughly, so that, yes, those on lower incomes will get more. But if you're, a 45% taxpayer, well, unfortunately, you're going to miss out on that tax relief because you're going to have less go into your pot. These are all very, very difficult decisions, but let's just hear the rest of this. And I want to jump into an angle that I think is really, really important and possibly some practical things as well.
However, when we add all of this together, we can see that it's still barely touching the sides. There really are no palatable options for the Chancellor, only toxic political choices.
So from my calculation here, I mean, that leaves probably about, I want to say about 15 billion quid that we're going to have to find, which really does beg the really difficult question of how is she going to find this money if she's not going to increase taxes? Simply reversing national insurance contribution reductions that we received under Jeremy Hunt is not going to be enough. Clearly cutting ISA limits from 20,000 to 4,000 for the cash ISA is not going to be enough. All of these measures are not going to be enough. So there needs to be some form of tax increase in some way, shape or form. We're hearing that they're completely discounting a wealth tax now, which is surprising. I don't know whether this is a red herring, but I think that they need to think about everything, and everything has to be on the table, because if not, where are we going to find this from? I mean, one of the reasons why I think we've seen the Bank of England reduce the Bank of England base rate last week was because, well, if you reduce the bank rate, that's the cost of borrowing. So companies can afford to now borrow money, invest more money. That then helps the economy. But is it going to be enough? To the tune of 15 billion quid? I don't know. But this is something else that I do want to jump into. And this is a conversation of what is the impact of this going to be for people who are just ordinary people going to work every single day on an average salary in the UK. Now, the average salary in the UK right now is about £35,000 per year. That's for the average household. Now, on that level of income, you're a basic rate taxpayer. This is how much you're paying in tax, about 6,280. So quite a big chunk. It means that effectively your take-home pay is going to be around about 2,300 roughly. Now, on average, most households for a single person in the UK will pay somewhere between £1,732 roughly per month. That gives you a total of £22,512 in terms of your cost of living, right? Now, for most people, that will mean that you have a disposable income of 661 per year. Now, per month, sorry. Now, I work with a lot of people coaching, and I have not yet seen, which I'm seeing one for a while now, where they have, on average salaries, 600 quid disposable income every single month. I haven't seen one for a while. I can't remember the last time I saw one on an average salary. And whilst these numbers on paper might seem really, really attractive, right? Which On paper, you'd be thinking, well, what's the problem? Where's the squeeze? The reality is these numbers are far, far from reality. There's a lot of conversation at the moment around the inflation number. This is where I really want to get into the detail here, because there are two factors at play that are going to impact people on a day-to-day basis. You've got inflation up here, you've got taxation up here. Now, ideally, what you don't want to see is you don't want to see inflation putting downward pressure, because what that is going to do is that's going to impact your disposable monthly income. So it means that prices are going up. So the price of food, energy, electric, gas, all of those things are going up. You might even have an increase in council tax if you've been around this year as well. All of those things have gone up. That's adding to your cost of living. So all of a sudden, you're now in an environment where what you'll find is that this pot is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's going to eat right in to your disposable income. Now, most people may be able to cope with this to a certain extent. Others may not be able to. But what really begins to hurt people is if we start to see taxation also squeeze from the bottom here. So not only are you getting the downward pressure from top, from inflation, cost of things going up, you're now going to have a government that is potentially going to be looking at increasing taxes, which means that now this pot also starts to increase. Meaning not only are you seeing an increase in your cost of living, you're seeing an increase in your tax burden. And again, this is now going to reduce even further the disposable income that you're going to have. And this is a situation that I feel a lot of people are going to find themselves in, where it's going to become even harder to survive because you're being squeezed from the top and from the bottom. And if you're experiencing this right now, you know people that are experiencing this. It's hard. It's really, really difficult. Please do let me know what you think in the comment section down below. So here it comes in terms of, look, I don't want to dwell on just like the negative things, right? Because controlling the controllables and being in control of, I suppose, your purse as much as you possibly can, outside of the factors of inflation and taxation, because those are the biggest threats to households in the UK right now. What can you do? What can you do to insulate yourself a little bit? Now, this isn't going to be rocket science. It's things that you've heard 1,000 times before. But I do think there are two things that need to be considered quite carefully. And look, both of them are not quick fixes. One of them is probably going to annoy a lot of people, because the question is, why should you have to? And I agree. Why should you have to? Why should we have to? Why should you have to go and see if you can increase your income? Because the reality for a lot of people is, if you're able to push your income up through some means, then you're going to have extra cash to play with. Although, obviously, it's counterintuitive, because when you earn more cash, you've got to pay more tax. It's punitive to a certain degree. But increasing your income, first and foremost, is really, really important in this equation. Now, there are different ways in which you can do this. There's lots of side hustles that you can do. I find people trying to do Amazon FBA, people trying to do all kinds of things, selling and buying things on eBay. Again, all of those things, again, you've got to pay tax for. But increasing your income is absolutely crucial where you can. The other thing that you can do, which I think is more of a, I guess, realistic for a lot of people, because look, I appreciate if you're already in a 9 to 5, you're already working your socks off. Not a lot of people have the ability to be able to take on a second job or a side hustle to be able to increase their income. They simply just don't have enough hours in the day to be able to do that. But so here's the second thing that you can do that will require a little bit of an investment of time. But if you do it once, you should be able to get good benefit and a good bang for your buck. And that is ensuring that you're going back over your finances. Again, this is not rocket science. You've heard this from me a million times, and probably a load of other financial influencers before. How can you reduce your expenditure? Now, for a lot of people, mortgages, rent, council tax, those are all fixed things. But if you've got anything in contract, things like your Sky, for example, where, you're out of the first year's contract and maybe you're just rolling, or your phone contract and you're on a rolling contract, go and revisit those things, because, sometimes being able to renegotiate those things and see if there are any cost savings that you can make can be an absolute lifesaver for a lot of people in these instances. The other thing is trying, if you can, and this is where I believe a lot of people have the biggest bang for buck, is trying to take a really proactive view at your debts. So if you have a credit card, if you have kind of car finance, personal loan, those kind of things, how can you streamline those things specifically? And there are very specific things you can do. So for example, on the credit card, it's 0% balance transfers. You've got to be aware of what is required of you in order to be able to do that. The amount of people that I've coached have been through my book club who have a lot of credit cards and they've done the 0% balance thing, but they've made simple mistakes, the cardinal sins that I've also made, where they've not really paid off any of the balance. They've just used that 0% balance period to pay literally just minimal amounts, the minimum payment, reduced it a little bit. That becomes problematic for the credit card companies if you do this 2, 3, 4 times in a row. So there are things that you can do. And if you need help, look, reach out to me. I run coaching sessions that talk specifically about this. You can consolidate. There are a number of options. But every time I've worked with someone, literally, when we look at their debt, that seems to be the lowest hanging fruit. As long as everything else like around credit scores is kind of okay, and there are no missed payments, there are no late payments, none of that stuff. Your debts, if you have them, can be really nice low hanging fruit. I had someone in the one of the cohorts of my book club. We ended up saving her something like £400 a month just on consolidation of debt alone, and that gives a lot of headroom. That gives a lot of relief, stress relief, in terms of your finances might be stretched now, but consolidating, looking at your debt plan and constructing the debt plan specifically can really help you release money. Again, if you need help with that, please do reach out to me. There is an email linked in the comment section or in the description down below. But let me know what you think of this. I'm at that phase where I'm kind of expecting that taxes are going to go up in the autumn statement. I don't see how she's going to be able to manage things if she doesn't. And the trifecta of the fact that we are going to see inflation hit 4% because the energy price cap is going to increase at the next read, from what I'm hearing. All of that stuff is going to add financial pressure. So being proactive, doing the things that you can do, controlling the controllables is very important right now. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Catch you soon. Cheers.